The single dad rushed his boss to the hospital, then she wrote his name on the form. The moment Daniel saw his boss collapse on the polished marble floor, he forgot about his overdue rent, his exhausted body, and the fact that he had promised his little daughter he would be home before bedtime. His boss, Victoria Hale, the most intimidating woman in the company, was lying unconscious in the back seat of his old car, struggling to breathe. Daniel pressed the accelerator and rushed toward the hospital, praying he wouldn't lose the woman who had once given him a chance when everyone else had turned him away. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that one good heart can change another person's life, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bright Kindness. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to people who need a little hope. Daniel had been a single father for 6 years. Every morning began before sunrise. He packed a small lunch for his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, woke her gently for school, and then hurried to work as an assistant at Hale Enterprises. His apartment was tiny, his car was old, and his wallet was almost always empty by the end of the month. But Daniel never complained. Lily was the reason he kept going. He had promised her that no matter how difficult life became, she would never feel alone. At work, Victoria Hale was known as a demanding boss. She rarely smiled, expected perfection, and seemed to have no patience for excuses. Daniel often worked late because he needed every hour of overtime he could get. One evening, while most employees were leaving the building, Daniel noticed Victoria walking toward the parking garage. Suddenly, she stopped, grabbed her chest, and collapsed. Daniel ran to her immediately. He called emergency services, but when he saw how pale she had become, he knew they might not arrive in time. With trembling hands, he helped her into his car and drove toward the nearest hospital. The entire journey felt like a race against time. Victoria was barely conscious, and Daniel kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror. He remembered how she had once rejected his request to leave work early because Lily had a fever. At the time, he had gone home angry and hurt. Yet now, none of that mattered. She was a human being in danger, and Daniel refused to leave her. When they reached the emergency department, Daniel jumped out and shouted for help. Nurses rushed Victoria onto a stretcher while doctors surrounded her. Daniel stood outside the treatment room, breathing heavily, his hands shaking. Then a nurse approached him with paperwork and asked for the patient's emergency contact information. Daniel froze. He knew Victoria's name, but he had no idea who her family was. He searched her phone, found a contact marked "Family," and gave the information to the nurse. Minutes later, a doctor came out and explained that Victoria had suffered a serious cardiac episode. She needed immediate treatment, and the hospital required someone to complete several emergency forms. Daniel signed where he could, but then something unexpected happened. Victoria opened her eyes. She was weak, confused, and barely able to speak. The nurse placed the form in front of her and asked who should be listed as her emergency representative until her family arrived. Victoria looked across the room at Daniel. The exhausted single father who had just risked everything to save her was standing there in an old jacket, his face pale with worry. With trembling fingers, Victoria took the pen. And instead of writing the name of a relative, she slowly wrote one name across the form, Daniel Carter. Daniel stared at the paper in disbelief. He couldn't understand why she had chosen him. Victoria looked at him and whispered that years ago, when Daniel had first applied for a job, every manager had rejected him because he was a single father. She had been the only one who believed his circumstances didn't define his abilities. She had hired him because she remembered what it felt like to be judged by people who knew nothing about her own struggles. Then Victoria revealed something Daniel never knew. She had been quietly reviewing his work for months. She knew he stayed late, knew he sometimes skipped lunch, and knew he used his overtime money to pay Lily's school expenses. She had also discovered that Daniel had recently received an eviction notice. Daniel lowered his eyes, embarrassed, but Victoria told him not to be ashamed. She said that being poor had never made him less valuable, and being a father had never made him less capable. Weeks later, Victoria recovered. When she returned to the office, she called Daniel into her office. Daniel expected a promotion or perhaps a simple thank you. Instead, Victoria handed him an envelope. Inside was a new employment contract, a significant raise, health benefits, and a company-sponsored education fund for Lily. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He tried to thank her, but Victoria stopped him and reminded him that he had already repaid the kindness. He had saved her life when he had every reason to simply walk away. Daniel went home that evening and hugged Lily tightly. For the first time in years, he wasn't calculating how many days remained until payday. He wasn't afraid of the landlord's next knock. He simply held his daughter and cried quietly, realizing that sometimes the kindness we give when nobody is watching eventually finds its way back to us. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in kindness, and subscribe to Bright Kindness. You never know when a simple act of compassion might become the reason someone else keeps believing in humanity. Before you leave, comment, "Kindness always returns," if you believe one good deed can change a life. Because Daniel didn't save his boss because she was powerful. He saved her because she was human. And Victoria didn't change Daniel's life because she owed him anything. She did it because, in one terrifying moment, she remembered something the world often forgets: kindness is not measured by what we have, it is measured by what we are willing to give when someone else needs us most.